who are extraordinary. Martin Luther King, extraordinary. However, if they had not done what they did, chances are somebody else would have done it in their stead. Because the atmosphere was right for India, for example, to regain its independence from Great Britain. The civil rights struggle started long before Dr. King actually became active in it, and so on, so on. So we worship the individual, and then we say things like, you are sort of fitter than the others. However, it is actually the group, it is the atmosphere, the society itself, and somebody else would have come as well. How do we do it with societal need? How do we build class into that?
There obviously, well, not obviously, but there should be like a working force, a labor force that's, like there's movers and the shakers of the world who, have to be supposedly higher up and make all the, big decisions. And
somebody has to be in charge.
Right, and then there's someone has to do the work, build houses, whatever.
Yeah. And somebody has to do all this labor and so on and so on.
Right.
There's an interesting argument being made, and I appreciate the sentiment, I don't appreciate the argument, but the argument is being made that undocumented migrants into the U.S. provide a lot of the labor that documented and citizens, members of the U.S. don't want to do. They do the dirty work of cleaning and harvesting and so on and so on, and therefore undocumented laborers are desperately needed. I appreciate the sentiment and the economic reality of it. I don't like the argument because it says, well, we need to exploit these people. This is what they're good for. I understand that the people who say this don't mean it like this, but it can be translated in this, and it's sort of a borderline argument to make. But there's this idea that, especially said by those who need services, that somebody has to serve me. It's good for society if there are people around who do this work for me. So we can take a look at this very conservative approach of why society is, and we can find actually class in there, although they didn't necessarily always talk about class. To a large degree, in the 19th century specifically, there was an attempt, of course, as we've talked about, to bring class differentiation or stratification society down to the victim deserves it. The physical sciences came in, biology, for example. You deserve to be enslaved, you deserve to be segregated through Jim Crow because of the melanin in your skin. We don't want to talk about class, we want to make the victim responsible in a way in which the victim can't do anything about it, because if you tie subordination into a physical characteristic, then it's very hard to argue against that. And so this was in the 19th century, and for many people when it comes to sex, still today, as well as sexuality, but for race in the 19th century, that was incredibly successful. And we talked about both evolution, and then last time we talked about race and relations theories a little bit, especially in terms of assimilation and who has more chances to be assimilated. But the differentiation, of course, becomes very, very important. The social sciences sort of come with this. We sort of stopped looking at anthropology when we came to the switch to cultural anthropology. We're actually, after the break, going to come back into that and continue then with the first half of the 20th century into the 50s, 60s. But sociology, history, orthodox economics, political science, and social psychology also have a very, very conservative outlooks on society as it is stratified works, and therefore we need to legitimize how it works. Why? Not necessarily, but how. And of course, in the 19th and now in the 20th century, we add the blame the victim very openly. In criminal justice, this is called victim precipitation. Criminal justice, by the way, only uses that for sexual assaults against women. This is when that term comes in, that sexual assaults against women are precipitated by the victim. If you have your house broken into, you are not precipitating that crime by merely having a house. So there's a strong gender component to this. But blaming the victim is sort of a parlor game that a lot of people like to play. but nobody really wants to talk about class. And this is also why I make specifically a difference between orthodox economics and heterodox economics. There are few heterodox economics departments in the country. My old school, UMKC, actually had one of them. What they tend to do is they look at economics as a part of culture. And so you get a much broader view of how economic exchange works. They include anthropology, sociology, and so on and so on. But with the others, there can be very, very strong strands of actually working for the elites that are in power, because to a certain extent, those are the elites that really, truly, that pay our research. If we want to do anything, we need to apply for funds. These funds come from donors. Some of them are public. When we talk to, I'm right now writing a grant for the Department of Justice. Others are private. So we have to do research that satisfies those donors. Now, some donors are nice, the NSF, for example. Others are not so nice. They make very sure that only that research gets done that they find interesting. But there's a strong strand in here. Cultural anthropology, as we're going to see, is going to at least partially run away from that. After 1970, it completely, with a few individual exceptions, of course, always runs away from that, and this is why nobody likes us. But we want to really focus on class. And again, let me reiterate, we have to pay attention to the speakers. We have to pay attention to the location of the author. Because very frequently, when you, these surveys actually have been done, when researchers go out on the street, any average metropolis in the U.S., they ask 100 people, what class are you? Everybody's going to tell them middle class. This is sort of the thing to be. Then you ask what kind of income. Well, people who are $20,000 a year think they're in the middle class, just as people who earn $200,000 a year. There's a huge, incredible range in that. What is the average income, by the way, in the U.S.? A little bit higher than that. You're very depressed.
50,000.
Lower?
45.
43. No. Around 43,000. That is sort of the average income. Now, people who make $200,000 a year, are they comparative to people who make $43,000 a year? One of the interesting things is in my food and culture class, I showed my class a comparison in terms of people buying from different classes, buying fresh vegetables, meats, fruits, and so on and so on. One of the things that is sort of everybody knows in nutrition is that poor populations tend to be more obese because they can't afford fresh fruits and vegetables. They can't afford foods that are actually nutritional and good for you because these foods are very, very expensive. Which does hold true when you take a look at the lowest quintile in terms of income. But then when you go to the highest quintile in terms of income, these people are not changing their diets. They still have very, very few fresh fruits and vegetables. Now they can afford them, but there's an ingrained food pattern, of course, that doesn't necessarily change. But there's a huge difference in disposable income. There's a huge difference in how you react to catastrophes. There is a suggestion by personal finance planners that you should always have a nest egg of 6 months of your salary. How many people have that?
What if you don't work and you still have money saved up?
Well, if you can live off that money for 6 months.
No, like you don't touch that money. Like I'm not really.
No, but the question which the economists or financial planners ask you is: imagine you would lose your job today. Can you live off that money for 6 months?
No.
Most people actually can't. Actually, most people are one paycheck away from being destitute, from losing their house, their apartment, if they have car payments, their car, and so on and so on. If you are at $43,000 a year, you need those $43,000. If you're at $200,000 a year, can you lose $43,000?